This video I'm going to show you how to make your morphology figure ground maps. The first thing that you're going to do is you are going to open up the base file that I gave you for your neighborhood. So in Photoshop you just go open your neighborhood map. So I have Circle North. Okay, so I have my neighborhood map open, and then I'm going to create a new file that's 17 inches wide, 11 inches high, 300 resolution, RGB color. Create. I'm going to take my neighborhood map. I'm going to drop it into my main file. And center it. And then I'm going to lock it. Well, first I'm going to name it like my base map. I'm going to lock it and then create a new layer that will be my buildings 2020. In a figure ground map, the buildings are going to be colored in black, so those are the figures, and the ground is the white space in between. So while I'm on this buildings 2020 layer, I can go to my magic wand tool and then go up to select and select color range. In class last week we discovered that if you set it to around 70 for fuzziness and then go ahead and pick the color of the building, you get pretty much all the buildings. Now there's going to be some areas where you have to go in and fill in stuff because of the lines, but I can then go here to the color and my paint bucket. Again, make sure I'm on this buildings 2020 layer, so it's its own layer. Drop the paint in there, shut off my base map, and I've got a pretty good figure ground map. Now what I need to do is, in areas like this where this building is, I can go ahead to the polygon lasso tool, or I can use sometimes the rectangular marquee tool. If it's a building that has no angles in it, I could go ahead and use this marquee tool and hold down the shift key so that I get so it'll add all my rectangles together. And then I can drop the paint in. If you drop it in a couple times, it'll usually get it done. Or there's spots. I could go ahead with my paint bucket, or I'm sorry, my paintbrush. Let's make the paintbrush a little bit bigger and just color that in. And then in areas I'm going to shut the grid off. Extra. So in areas, and then in areas where there's lines, here it's showing, some kind of line from the street grid. I can just go to my eraser tool and click, and just like with the paintbrush, if I hold the shift key down, it'll go in a straight line and take up like a big space. So, I can go up here, click there, go all the way down here, and get rid of that line. So just go through your map and clean it up. Where you see things like this line, I see the circle line coming through, I can go ahead and fix all those buildings. The other thing you can do is you can go to the Cuyahoga County GIS website. So if I go to Cuyahoga County GIS website, I can see if the buildings layer. I can turn only the buildings layer on and export the buildings layer. Whatever loads up. So if I go to all right, so here's my neighborhood that I'm working in. I get in close enough. It's a little too close. Zoom out once. So in my layers here, we can shut off these. Okay. So I'm gonna turn on property use, but shut off all these. Turn on building footprints, and shut everything else off. So here are my building footprints all by themselves. And if I go to print, I printed your maps out 11 by 17, no legend, PDF, high resolution, and then the scale that your maps are is 1 to 400, so this selection right here. And I want to make sure that it is landscape 11 by 17. Now, if I unclick on this lock print preview with map, then I can move around. I'm going to zoom out. I can move this around and get kind of, I know Superior Avenue is here and 105th is here, and my map looks something like, centered something like that. And then just hit print. Oh crap, it changed my... Okay. Print map. And then it'll say preparing file, please wait. And when the map's ready, there'll be a link to it. You can open the file. I don't know where it went. Oh, here it is. Okay, so I could go back to, here's the map. So go back to Photoshop, File, Open. I'll open this map that I just created, make sure that it's got 300 resolution so that it matches with what I'm working in. I'll drop this in here. I'm going to shut these buildings off. I'm going to take this new base map and move it to center it. Call it base map 2. Okay. I'm going to put this base map 2 down here. I'm going to lock it and create this new layer. This new layer I'll call Buildings 2022. Go to the base map layer. Again, go to the magic wand tool, do select color range. All right, click OK. Go to my Buildings 2022 layer. Make sure I have black on and drop my color in. And there I have a pretty good figure ground map. Again, you might have to go in and just, tidy things up a little bit and, clean up some of your edges using your paintbrush or your eraser tool and, this rectangular marquee and this lasso or polygon lasso tool in order to clean up some of your edges. But this looks pretty good. Now for the older map, If you go on to Blackboard, oops, and you go to the home page, and then go to Project Resources. In there I have a link to the Esri Cleveland Historical Maps. And for most of you, the 1927, 1937 sort of era is going to be where you want to be working. So if I go to East 105th Street and Superior for my neighborhood, and I zoom in on this area of the neighborhood, this is what my neighborhood looks like. Now, in order to get the detail that I need, I might have to patch together a couple different areas. So let's say I want to patch together a couple different areas. What I can do is I can do a screen print, and just make sure when you do your screen print, so I'm gonna save this portion of the map, name it 1, and just remember how you're going. So I'm gonna start in the top left, I'm gonna move right and then go down and then over to the left, and then down and then over to the right. So don't zoom in, don't zoom out, leave it at the same exact scale, and move your map over, and make sure you leave some overlap, right? So you're going to copy two different, or make two different screenshots that have overlap of your buildings. Whoops. And then I'll do another screenshot. And then I'll move down this way, make sure that there's some overlap over here, do another screenshot. And then I'll go to the left, make sure there's some overlap, do another screenshot. Again, I'm not zooming in or zooming out, so everything's staying at the same scale. When I go back into Photoshop, I'm going to shut all these other layers off. And I'll put these in a folder. I'll call this my 2020 map, and create a new folder that's going to be my 1927 to 1937. So you can name it whatever year you're working from map. And I'm going to open up all my screenshots. So I'll select these screenshots, and they'll all open up here. You can open them up one at a time or open them up all together. Sometimes if you open them up all together, it gets a little confusing. I only have 4 here, so I'm going to drag and drop these down. And then I'm going to drag these all into my main I'm going to drag and drop all of these in and then close them when I'm done. I think I might have 2 of these. Sometimes you just got to be careful. Like I did this one twice, so I'm just going to go ahead and delete one of these. So just close them out once you drag and drop them in. Okay, so now I've got all of these in here. What I'm going to do, so see they're pretty big, so I'm going to reduce them so they all fit in here. I'm going to just reduce them, I don't know, 50%, so I can work with them more easily, and I'm going to have to scale them again over my other map, but I can take these now one by one and start to piece them together. To kind of figure out where they go. That one goes up there. So it's like you're putting together a puzzle, and see there's this overlap here. So I'm going to put that one over the top there and see where they overlap. And you can, when you put your puzzle together, just zoom in, and you can use the arrow keys on your keyboard and just kind of move things around. And then what I do is I turn this off and on, and then I can see, oh, I need to move this down into the. And sometimes it's like, it seems like it's not going together exactly, so you just zoom in a little bit. And I'm looking here to see how these go together. Looks like it's going. Might have to zoom in again. I think that's about as good as I'm going to get it, which is fine. So you can do this for all four or however many screenshots you have. And you can zoom in and zoom out on the on this Cleveland Historic Maps website to get what you feel is a good enough quality of clarity from these maps for you to work in Photoshop in. Then when you go back into Photoshop, really what you're going to do is you're going to take these, I'm going to shut these off, let's just say that I pieced them all together. But I'm going to take what I put together, now that my map is all like one, and I'm going to select them both, right click and hit merge layers, and so that turns that into one map. Then what I do is go back to my base map and turn that on underneath, go to the map that I'm working in and give it a transparency so I can see now. I can go ahead and look, and I can find a building that, either a building, or if I'm using maybe this map instead that has the street layer, I think my building layer, let's see the street layer. I can zoom in and find a building or some sort of thing that's the same in both of the maps that I can scale from. So here's the school building. Let's see if I have that on here. And nope, the school building wasn't in there at that time. And I wonder why I'm all the way all to the right of the neighborhood. So here we go. So here's 110th Street. I'm looking at, see where 110th Street is on here. 110th Street, so I'm close. I'm going to create these guidelines for 110th Street here so I know about where it is. I can use my arrows to get that kind of close. And it looks like I have to scale up just a little bit. So I'll do edit, retransform. And if you go up here, these two are the scale. I can click in there and just to do it incrementally, make sure I'm at the end of the 100 and just hit my up arrow and it'll do it like at 1%. So let's say I get it scaled right. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new layer up here, and we'll just call it buildings, 1927 to 1937. And then this one it's not as easy to go in with your color selection tool, because there's a bunch of different colors in here. The red buildings are brick and stone, and the yellow ones are wood. But what I can do is, it's going to take a little bit of time, but I go in with my rectangular marquee tool and hold down shift and do a number of buildings at a time and just get it close. It doesn't have to be perfect. And if I have angled buildings, I could use my this polygon lasso tool. These are not angled buildings, but I'm just showing you how you can use your polygon lasso tool also for things that are not rectangles. You can do that, or like for a building like this one, I can just again use multiple rectangles together and just let them all kind of merge together by holding down the shift key. And then, go drop some black in that, and then keep on going until you finish your maps. So that's how you make your two morphological figure ground maps. And then just go ahead and, like I showed you before, file, save as. Well, first thing, let's just say this is my 1920s map, right? Oops. I'm gonna shut off of these. I'm gonna go layer, flatten image, right? Let's just say I have all the buildings, drawn in here. I'm going to do File, Save As, and I'm going to save it as a JPEG. I'm going to save this as a JPEG and save, and then we'll just call this Buildings 1927 to 1937. I'm going to make sure I save it as a copy, save it as a JPEG, and then go ahead and put it in, create a folder that's called like Morphology, and you should save. So I'll save this as my buildings JPEG, right? Click OK. Then I'm going to do Command or Control Z and undo. I'll shut that off, and I'll turn on my buildings 2020 map. I'll do layer, flatten image. OK. File, save as. Go back to my computer, or go back to my folder, and I'll do buildings 2020. Go ahead and save that. Oops, wait, cancel. I want to make sure I save this as a copy. File, save as. Make sure I save it as a copy. Call it buildings 2020. And undo all this, and then just make sure you save. I'm going to just save my Photoshop file. I should have done this in the beginning, but make sure I save my Photoshop file so I have it to go back to later if I need to. Just save my Photoshop file, and there you go. That's how you make your morphology maps. If you have questions, go ahead and text or email me, and I will get back to you as soon as possible.